Hello, everyone. I just wanted to check in for week 3 of the course, module 3, a being towards death or a being beyond death. I have a few remarks to make about the sort of idea and theme for this module. And although everyone, not everyone, but almost everyone is doing their work on a regular basis, a few people are not. And let me just reiterate the 3 things that need to be done each week for every particular module. The first is the study questions. The second is the discussion post, and the third is the module essay. And let me just reiterate something I've said several times before, and that is that the study questions and the essay can be submitted late for partial credit. So if you have missed study questions or you have missed an essay, you can still turn them in. You will get partial credit. The discussion post cannot be turned in late. So if you don't do the discussion post by the deadline, you cannot make up that particular assignment. Looking at the theme for this module, for this week, a being towards death or a being beyond death, the big idea is the contrast between Martin Heidegger and Paul Louis Landsberg. I've given you a couple things that I hope give you some idea of what Heidegger was getting at when he characterized human existence itself as a being towards death. The first is the wonderful clip from the film My Dinner with Andre, focusing on what Wallace Shawn says in that clip, where he actually specifically refers to Heidegger. I think it's a very nice characterization of what Heidegger, in some respect, was getting at. Heidegger is sort of notoriously difficult to read, and I think that becomes clear from the piece by Simon Critchley on Heidegger. I didn't want to give you a passage from Heidegger. I think it would be too much work, but Critchley tries to give some sense of why Heidegger would have characterized human existence as a being towards death. I think that what's important to note is that the idea here is not that human beings happen to be the kind of creatures that are mortal and die, but rather that is essential to their form of being. That is an awareness or consciousness of our mortality is absolutely crucial, Heidegger thinks, for living what he would call an authentic life or living in truth. This is to be, I think, contrasted with what Paul Landsberg says. Very brief excerpts from The Experience of Death. When I do this class as a 15-week class, we read the whole thing over a couple of weeks. That is not suitable for this form of the class, the accelerated version. So I just gave you a couple of brief excerpts to give you a hint of his opposition to that, his specifically Catholic, I would say, opposition to that. And just wanted to, again, reiterate that although a being towards death is a translation of Heidegger's German, I don't know, I think it's design something Toad, I don't know German, but the being beyond death is my own way of characterizing Landsberg's ideas about death. Just to be clear, that he never called his own philosophy of death a being beyond death. That's me. I hope it's true to his thinking, but that is me. And finally, the excerpt from W.H. Auden's poem Canzone, which I think is very helpful, really, in and goes along with Landsberg's idea that the human person fundamentally built into our very existence is a demand for some sort of, well, let's call it immortality of the soul, some sort of life beyond death. So, yeah, I think that it's an extremely interesting material this week. Landsberg and Heidegger were very different thinkers, yet in some ways they were quite similar. They were trying to understand the place of mortality and death in its meaning for human existence, and they had very different ideas. It's clear that for Heidegger, death is, generally speaking, Epicurean in the sense that death is the end of the person. To acknowledge death, to acknowledge our own mortality, is to recognize that we are finite creatures that come to an end. Whereas Landsberg completely rejects that idea and says that what it really means to be a human person is to realize that one has a demand for something beyond that finitude. So I would say extremely interesting material in this module.